Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast, and this might be the first podcast where around episode 100 where I'm a little nervous because I have a new friend, Jeb Blount, on the call, and man, it always disappoints me that your last name is not pronounced Blunt, but that's okay, Jeb Blount. And
it is pronounced Blunt.
It is pronounced Blunt.
No, my last name was pronounced Blunt.
Oh, I'm so excited about this because every time I see somebody introduce you, they're like, Jeb Blount. Okay, it's Jeb Blount. Now I'm even more excited. But Jeb is like one of the OG salesmen. Like I would put him up there with Dan Kennedy, Tony Robbins, these type of guys. He is the CEO and head sales trainer at Sales Gravy. He's written 15 books, of which one of them is in my all-time top 10 for books, period, and probably in my top 1 or 2 for sales books. It's called Fanatical Prospecting, and I got super lucky that I just messaged Jeb at the right time as his new book, Selling in a Crisis, is coming out. You know, we're recording this in October of 2020, where, you know, I work in the mortgage industry. I coach loan officers here in October of 2022. I think I said October 2020. See, I told you I was nervous, Jeb. October of 2022, like we're in a crisis right now. Interest rates have more than doubled in the last 10 months, right? There's war in Ukraine. People have political infighting issues. And at the end of the day, people who sell stuff, realtors, loan officers, car salespeople, they still got a job to do. We still got to lead generate. We still have to fanatically prospect, and we still have to sell stuff. So one, I'm super excited to talk to you. And two, like what a timely book to be releasing October of 2022. I think you even moved up the release schedule with your publisher because you're like, we've got to get this in the hands of salespeople to help them. So first of all, what did I miss in my jumbled introduction of you, and why the book right now?
Well, that's very good. But first, it's pronounced Blunt, so everybody listens. I mean, I have to deal with the Blount all the time. If I could go back to 2007 when I published my very first book, I would have taken the O out of my name, which is my family name, and I would have been like Emily Blunt, who is there's nobody had a BLUNT, it's BLOUNT everywhere, so that people would get it. It would be much better. But I don't think you missed anything. I think that I've been pushing to get the book out. So the story behind this book was in June of this past year, I was in New York meeting with my publisher, and we were talking about books that are coming up. So I'm an author, and I've got a series of books that I've got contracts for that, you know, are you know, just they're basically sales books, and we're building them on particular subjects. And Shannon, my publisher, says, "Well, what do you have that might be contemporary right now that we could maybe roll because we're seeing some turbulence in the economy?" And I said, I've been sitting on a book called Selling in the Crisis. I wrote part of it during the pandemic, but then, you know, we switched to virtual selling in March of 2020. So we made that pivot, and we didn't write Selling in the Crisis, but I've got a lot of this book sort of mapped out. She said, let's do it. So on July 1st, I parked myself for 2 months and I wrote this book. And as soon as I got it done, I'm on the phone with them and I'm screaming at them, you got to get the book out right now, because I'm posting pictures of me writing the book, you know, doing social media work. The response is just overwhelming. I need the book now. When can I get the book now? When can I get the book now? And I did a couple of posts and said, well, do you want the book now, or would you like it in November or December? And people overwhelmingly, we need the book. So I think the way that you said that is perfect. There are people in sales right now whose incomes are counting on their ability to close business, and especially if you're in real estate or mortgage, where you don't get a paycheck unless you sell something. So in those particular professions, if you don't sell, you don't eat. And if I were in that situation, I would feel anxiety and stress right now because of the coming storm. And you're probably looking for answers. And so I wrote the book that, for me, is designed to give you those answers. And I love the way this book's set up. It's not wonky. It's not a read where you got to dive in and like spend 4 years reading a billion-page book. Short, easy to consume chapters that you should be able to get up in the morning, take for 10 minutes, get you motivated for the day, so you go out and you crush it. And when you have a bad day, and you're gonna have a bad day because we're heading into a major storm, when that happens, you can come back, you can go to the book, pull the page out and read it, And probably not much different, Scott, than the way a lot of people consume fanatical prospecting. They go back and listen to the audiobook over and over again, or they pull a chapter out because they need something that day to hold on to because they just face so much adversity.
I was re-looking at my highlighted and tabbed out copy of Fanatical Prospecting, and you'll know the big sentence, the big highlight, the beginning of chapter 5 is, the more you prospect, the luckier you get, right? The more you prospect, the luckier you get. And what I love is you wrote a book in Fanatical Prospecting, and I want to tie this into Selling in a Crisis. You wrote a book in Fanatical Prospecting where you basically said, hey, you have to lead generate and prospect no matter what. Now I'm going to tell you all the excuses for 20 chapters and how to get over them and how to motivate. For me, it's easier, as a loan officer myself, as somebody who coaches loan officers and realtors, for me, it's really easy to coach and get people to commit and be motivated in times of, obviously abundance or when things are kind of even Steven. It's a little bit harder when we're in a crisis and they're like, well, I can't control what's going on in the Ukraine. I can't control Trump, Biden, interest rates, inflation. When my client says they can no longer afford the house because the interest rate is 6% instead of 3%, I can't sell around that. I can't stay motivated around that. So tell us, I really think your seminal work is Fanatical Prospecting, and I can't wait to read Selling in a Crisis because it's in the mail right now from Amazon. Thank you for moving up the release schedule. I'm going to coach that to all my people. What is in Selling in a Crisis that helps us get around the excuses, right? Because I could give you an hour-long podcast right now about why it's hard to be a loan officer, or it's hard to be a realtor, or it's hard to sell widgets. What would you say back to me that's in the book?
Well, let's start with in a crisis. In a crisis, everything is scarcer. So right now, if you're a loan officer, what you're finding is that buyers are scarcer. And buyers who are able to afford payments and buyers who are able to afford down payments are scarcer. So some of those buyers are having to make some adjustments in their expectations. Some of them are just going to go away. And there's not a thing that you can do about it. That's just the truth. And the thing about a crisis is that everything is scarce except for really 3 things: time, misery, and excuses. So if you think about that, you can have the abundance of every excuse that you want for why you're not bringing home the bacon to your family. You can have every complaint in the world about that. You can be as miserable as you want to be, and you can get super miserable. And I'll share some reasons why you might be miserable if you're in the mortgage space right now. But you can be super miserable. But the good news is that you still have 24 hours a day to do something about it. And the only 3 things that you can control in this moment and in this situation are your actions, what you choose to do, your reactions, how do you respond to this, and your mindset. And that's it. There's nothing else. So let's talk about response. So you were working with a buyer. They did their application. They went through underwriting. They have everything ready to go, and you're about to sign the mortgage papers, and they're looking at their payment because they're suddenly out of budget. But they've been approved, and they walk. That's going to happen. Straight up, that's going to happen. You can try to sell them out of it. You can try to deal with the objections, but you're going to have some customers that are going to walk, and there's not a thing that you can do about it. Here's a choice that you can make. You can become cynical, and you can say, well, because this happened to me, I'm no longer going to follow my tried and true processes. So the things that Scott coaches you to do as a mortgage lender, right? And I know that you teach your people, here's the process you go through. I'm no longer going to go out and do lead generation because, it doesn't matter anyway, because all the people that I bring in, they can't afford it. And by the way, as you start doing lead generation, it's going to get a hell of a lot harder. Excuse my language, a hell of a lot harder than it was even a few months ago, because the people that can afford the payments and the people that can afford the down payments and the people that are going to get through underwriting in this particular environment, those are going to become scarcer. So you're going to have to work a lot harder to get the same amount of leads coming in. You can make that choice, or you can have faith. And this is super important for a crisis. The faith is that if I do the right things consistently, then I'll be rewarded for it. I might have to do more of those things. I might have to work a whole lot harder than I did before. But the faith is that if I do the right things consistently right, I'm going to get rewarded for it. And the rainmakers in a crisis are the ones that don't lose faith in the process, in the system. Because the process and system didn't change because there was a crisis. The only thing that changed in a crisis is that there are fewer people out there that you're going to be able to write mortgages for. That's it. That's the only thing that shifted. And if you can manage your mindset and say, my mindset says, well, now I'm going to have to work harder. Now I'm going to have to lead generate harder. Now I'm going to have to be even more fanatical. And by the way, when I do get somebody who is willing to talk with me, I got to be 10 times better than I was before, because before I could take a bunch of shortcuts. Before I could skip steps in the sales process. Before I could get away with not calling them back because they would drive me crazy calling me because every other mortgage lender out there was so busy. They didn't have time for them anyway. You could get away with being mediocre and still win at a high level. Not anymore. And oh, by the way, nobody's calling you. So if you don't get up and go call them, you got a problem. So you can have faith that the system works. That's the key. You can control your actions, your reactions, and your mindset. And your mindset and your beliefs and your attitude about the way the system works, that's going to be key. And the way you respond to when bad things happen to you, that's going to be the key. So I think that, if you think about it, right, you still have 24 hours a day. Use it well. If you use it the right way, you're going to win. And by the way, here's the cool thing about especially your industry, Scott, is that right now there are people packing it up. They are folding up their briefcases. They're going away. Yep. Because like 8 months ago, your neighbor was a mortgage broker. I don't know why, but suddenly they decided they're going to be a mortgage broker. Like the kid down the street who just turned 18, now he's a mortgage broker. Everybody was a mortgage broker. I mean, 9 months ago, I'm giving speeches to big groups of mortgage brokers where they call me in to be a keynote speaker because I'm an author, and they're driving up in their Ferraris. It's like a luxury car dealership parked outside. Well, guess what? A lot of those Ferraris are going to go back to the dealership because they're going to be taken over if those individuals lose the faith in the system and the process. That's what matters. And you got to be better at it than you ever were before, because the crisis is going to reward excellence and it's going to punish mediocrity.
Yeah. I'll give you an interesting anecdote. One of my coaching clients, he's in the Sacramento, California area. He took 100 realtors, like not the top 50 in the market area, because he's like, everybody's calling them. So he took like 100 through 200. These are realtors that are confirmed closed at least $6 million in transactions last year. So they're making somewhere between 2 and 2.5%, even in California, making, 120, 150 grand last year. He's like, I'm going to call through all of them, set coffee appointments with them. About 30 people called him back. And of the 30 of them, 7 said, hey, I checked out. I took a government job. I'm going into solar sales. I'm going to go be a car salesman. I went back to my old profession. He's like, these are people who were, by any stretch of the imagination, successful realtors, closing at least 10 deals a year, making 150 grand. They're on the upswing. And less than 9 months later, they've already decided, not I'm joining another team, not, I'm going to do this part-time. They're like, I'm out. I can't handle it anymore. I can't lead generate. So for the realtors in the room that are like, oh man, it was kind of hard for me to interrupt people and do my prospecting when things were great and property values were going up and interest rates were going down. And now property values are going down and interest rates are going up. What do you tell the realtor out there that's got to stay motivated? Because, they get hammered every day. Why should I buy a house? Property values might be lower in 6 months. Why should I do this? Why can't I do that? Why can't I get this? I mean, I feel bad for lenders right now, but I feel real bad for realtors.
Well, this cycle repeats itself. If we go back to 2006, 7, and 8, everybody's the mortgage broker. Well, everybody's a real estate agent. I mean, you couldn't throw a rock, on a farm with acres and acres of land and nobody around. You'd still hit a real estate agent. One would pop out of the weeds. Like everybody was a real estate agent. So the same thing's going to happen in real estate. Things are going to get cleaned out. That's the beautiful thing about a cycle like this. When winter comes, all of those people that were competing against you that don't really have it in them, they're going to go. And he said 7 or 8 people checked out. Well, guess what? Half of them are going to be gone. Look next to you, just look to your left and the right. 2/3 of the real estate agents that are in the market right now will get out. But the real estate agents that are left will make more money than they were before. We see that in every single crisis, in every single cycle. Go back to 2020, we shut the entire economy down, and businesses are worried that they're going to be able to make it, and salespeople are worried that they're going to be able to sell anything. And, CEOs are calling me up and going, what do we do? What are we supposed to do? Flip forward 3 or 4 months. I got VPs of sales calling me and saying, I don't understand this. I'm like, what don't you understand? They're going, I've got reps on my team that are selling more than they've ever sold in their entire life. And I have other reps on my team that are getting close to being fired. They don't seem to be able to sell anything. They're like, nobody's buying. There's no way I can get out there. Nobody will talk to me. Nothing will happen. They're just making excuses. What was the difference in the two groups? Well, one group, the Rainmakers, said, you know what? It's bad out there. I mean, things are tough. Everything's hit the fan. So I'm not waiting around in the backyard like a rain barrel that maybe a lead will fall in. I'm going to go out and make it rain. So when everybody sat on the sideline, they went out and they were the lone voices. They were the ones that were knocking on the doors. They were the ones that said, well, nobody's at work anymore. They're all working at home. They went to their houses. They went out and they found the people that were buying, and they turned the economy around. The same thing in the real estate world. If you're a mortgage lender, if you're a mortgage broker, if that's your profession, you want to go hook your wagon to the Rainmakers. They're the ones that are going to still make it rain. And if you're a real estate agent, recognizing that if you will go out and list houses, there are people that are going to sell their houses. There were people selling their houses in the deep, dark depths of the Great Depression. They need someone to help them do that. There are people who are buying houses. There are people who are buying houses in the deep, dark depths of the Great Depression. There were people who were buying houses in the Great Recession. There were real estate signs on properties. So is it going to take a little bit longer? Yeah. So guess what? That little, donut you brought to the last open house and that you barely got the house staged for that, well, that's not going to work anymore. So you're going to have to get on social. You're going to have to shoot videos. You're going to have to go in and stage a house. You're going to have some real hard conversations with your homeowners about what they need to do to get their house ready to sell. You're going to have to go back and have these reality conversations about, look, you can't sell your house for that anymore. And there's a lot of homeowners out there that aren't going to believe you. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to do that. Every time a house gets listed for sale by owner, you got to be on the front step. And you got to keep talking with them and keep talking with them and keep talking with them until they get tired of having to do all the work themselves. Every time a house comes off of contract, you need to be on the front step of that house before that owner gets called by anyone else and you get that listing. And if you're a buyer's agent, you're going to have to do a better job of connecting with the buyer. You're going to have to be more responsive. But let me give you an example of this, Scott. So just so we're clear on this. I've got a real estate agent that I've worked with just for the past few years. And this was we were things weren't great, right? But they weren't terrible. But my wife and I started looking for a house in a pretty, affluent area around vacation homes. And I went on Zillow. We were talking about it, looking, just dreaming. You know how people do on Zillow. You just go to Zillow, you look around. And so I put some information into the forum, call me about a house. And then I did what everybody else does on that platform. I moved on to the rest of my life.
Right.
This cat calls me, and I left me a voicemail message. Then he emails me, and then he calls me again, and then he emails me again. This goes on for 3 weeks. And so finally I'm like, I got to talk to him. So I picked up the phone and talked to him. We had a great conversation, really nice person. We went up and took a look at the house. We didn't end up buying that one, but we bought another one. Now, I want you to check this out. He was the only real estate agent that talked to me. He was the only real estate agent that connected with me. He didn't list it. He just got the lead off Zillow, and he tracked me down until I called him back. Now, what if he had given up, after the first one? Because I just ignored him because I was doing something else.
Right.
He wouldn't have got the house. But now, this is important. Since that first purchase, he's done $4 million in real estate transactions with me, either listing or selling a house. That's the relationship he built by being proactive and by being relentless. That's when times were okay. Now times are really bad. The cynical real estate agent says, these people on Zillow and Twillo and wherever else, these leads that come in off the web, they're a waste of my time. They're just people shopping, dreaming, kicking tires. I'm not going to follow up, right? The Rainmaker says, my next $1 million customer is in those leads, and I'm going to track them down until they tell me to go away. I'm not going to take no for an answer. We're going to talk. That's the difference in mindset. And if you just think about that, how is it possible that in an area that has, the houses in this area are anywhere from $2 million to $10 million, that someone drops a lead in there with all of their contact information in it, and one real estate agent calls? How is that possible? It's malpractice.
It doesn't make sense because, I've sat on the quarterly earnings calls for Zillow, and, there will be 5 million houses sold in America this year. Zillow has sold 100 million leads a year for the last 5 years. So that means for every house that's sold, they're selling that lead 20 times, which means you should have had 20 realtors banging down your door and competing for your business. And this is an interesting mathematical equation. Between text message, email, phone call, how many times do you think he hit you up before he got you on the phone and you guys had a quality relationship building conversation?
I can tell you exactly 7 times.
7 times. So seven times, maybe he spent 3 minutes each, 20 minutes total trying to get in touch with you. That has turned into $4 million worth of business. Let's say the guy's netting 2.5 after all the commission splits and everything and his marketing costs. So, he made $80,000 for 20 minutes of focused prospecting. I mean, I don't know what you make, but my time is not more valuable than $4,000 a minute. $4,000 a minute.
That easy because it was almost like a House Hunters episode. We saw 3 houses and we bought one.
Yeah. So his hourly rate is about $10,000 an hour for just doing strategic follow up.
Exactly. And and by the way, he spent on the first purchase, he spent about 4 hours with us. Everything else we did by phone. After
Amazing.
that, it was just super easy. So now that we're in a crisis, now that winter is here, now that you're dealing with the storm clouds, you got to go farm a neighborhood. You got to go knock on every single door. You got to hand out your business card. You got to hand out your flyer. You got to build familiarity. You got to make sure that everybody knows that you're there because somebody's going to sell their house. Money is moving. It is always moving. You just got to go where the money is. And it's not going to be easy to find it because they're not going to call you. If you're a rain barrel and you're sitting in the backyard waiting for a lead to drop in, it is not going to happen. You've got to go out and meet people and have conversations with people. And all this means, Scott, is that right now you just have to be better. You got to prospect better, you got to lead generate better, you got to sell better, discover better, build relationships better, close better, negotiate better. You got to stage your houses better. You got to, if you're in mortgages, you got to work the system better. You got, whatever you have to do with your underwriters, you got to work them better. You got to do all of these things better. If you're going out and working with your real estate agents, you got to think, I'm going to go talk to 300 real estate agents that are really easy to talk to because they're only making $150,000 a year. Wrong people. It's Suttons Law. You know Suttons Law, right?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
No, I didn't figure you did. No, most people don't. It's a medical school thing, but if you think about it right now, if you're in mortgage or in real estate, Willie Sutton needs to be sort of your he's like your spirit animal. So Willie Sutton was a bank robber back in the 1920s, and you'll know this when I say it, but famously, he had gotten caught robbing a bank, and they were taken into prison. And a reporter shouted out, "Willie, Willie, Willie! Why do you keep robbing banks?" And he replied,
"I keep getting away with it."
No, because that's where the money is.
Oh, that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. And you've heard this before. Why do people rob banks? But that came from Willie Sutton.
That's pretty funny.
And Sutton's Law is used in medical schools. If you go to your doctor has been taught Sutton's Law for real. And what they teach doctors is when a patient comes in and they've got something wrong with them, focus on the most likely reason why there's something wrong with them rather than trying to do all these other tests for all these other things that might not be wrong with them. It makes perfectly good sense, right? So in a crisis, if you want to make money, go where the money is. It's pretty basic. But the problem is a lot of people don't change and they don't think. One story from the pandemic, one of my reps made a great living selling into professional sports. So February 2020, man, we are crushing it. We're in professional sports teams. We're training ticket salespeople because that's what we did. And our relationships are strong and solid. March 14th, 2020, the bottom fell out of that market because every stadium closed. 2 weeks later, Robin, what's going on? She's like, I'm not getting anybody on the phone. Nobody's talking to me. I can't book anything. I don't know what's going on here. Like, they're like canceling things. So I was like, why are you still calling them? And she goes, I don't know. I mean, I guess this. I mean, that's my prospect list. I said, Robin, where's the money? And she's like, really cynically goes, it's in banks. And I said, yep, that's exactly right. Because right then they were kicking off PPP loans and all these other things. Yep. And so suddenly small regional banks needed to outsell the big banks in order to capture all that money. And so she was being cynical with me, or, and really sort of sarcastic.
Right.
But she turned her focus to banks. Today we have a huge market share of training inside of financial institutions. Why? Because she went where the money is. So you start thinking about it as a real estate agent, go where the money is. Go to the neighborhoods where people are still doing well. Go to the people who have particular demographics that are able to afford the down payments. The world's going to shrink. Things are going to get scarcer, but the people are out there that still have money. The money is still going to be moved. Houses are going to move, and that's not going to be something that's going to be completely cut off. So you got to go out there and find it. But if you're knocking on the same doors as you were before, maybe you just need to rethink, where is the money going to shift to? And it always does this in real estate. You just read the newspaper. And I say newspaper figuratively, which is on my phone these days, but read the Wall Street Journal. But that's part of the key to increasing your sales and increasing your income when everybody else around you is losing.
There's a line that you have in one of your books, and I wrote it down. It said, the only way to start a sales conversation with these high-value prospects is to interrupt them. And then you go on to talk about, high-value prospects versus low-value prospects. And I wrote in the margin, anybody worth working with is worth interrupting. And,
yes.
I can see the cynic rolling their eyes. Oh, yeah, it's so easy for you, Scott, and you, Jeb. You're sitting there. You're giving us advice. You're not the one that has to go knock on doors and get shit on because we're interrupting people at dinner. And you're not the person that has to call the top producing realtor who's gotten 500 calls today. Because I can tell you from the mortgage side, directly to your point, any realtor worth working with is worth interrupting. The realtor who's calling me to say, hey, can we get together for coffee? I know what this is. You want me to spend $1,000 on your Zillow lead spend, and you haven't closed a deal in 3 months, right? Like, I already know this. The ones that are interrupting me, I don't want to work with, and the ones who I want to work with, I need to interrupt. So can you talk a little bit about either the habits or the mindset or the mental commitment that it's going to take for those people who do want to survive? Because it is hard walking the neighborhood, knocking on doors when you get 9 out of 10 slammed in your face, and the 3 out of 30 that do answer, 2 of them tell you to piss off or in the middle of dinner. How do you keep the mental focus and the good habits to get to that 30th person who's going to turn into a deal?
I always hate it when, doing a podcast, like the Sales Gravy podcast, and the person I'm interviewing turns around and starts interviewing me, but I'm just going to do this to you.
Perfect.
How did you get me on this podcast?
Well, it's funny. I asked a friend of a friend to vouch for me so we could become Facebook friends a couple years ago. Then I stayed in touch with you, commented on a bunch of your stuff. And then as soon as I saw you had a new book coming out, I was like, I know authors, even millionaire authors, all they give a shit about when they have a book coming out is promoting their book. So I immediately emailed you and I was like, hey man, here's what we can do for you. Here's the value we can add with promoting your book. Could I get 45 minutes of your time for a podcast?
You interrupted me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think while I was shaving, I got interrupted, right? So, and here's the truth, okay? The Facebook side of things, I don't really. I mean, I think that it seemed vaguely familiar, but it's like I don't spend that much time on Facebook. I typically just post things every once in a while, and I'm off. So even though that may have had some sort of subtle psychological thing, what you really did was you interrupted me with the right timing, because the thing is that, like you were talking about, the people that interrupt me, every week we get 20 requests to be on podcasts. And what's so funny is, there's all of these poor people that are running around with their PR people, begging to get on my podcast, which is almost impossible. But people beg me to be on their podcast. That's a really good, it's an honor, and it's flattering, and it's wonderful. but I don't have any time. Like I'm literally like, if I was on everybody's podcast, I wouldn't sleep. And I figured out, a long time ago that if I don't take care of myself, I'm no good for anybody.
Right.
So it's really rare. I think I've been on 3 podcasts this year. Like I've gone on and like joined someone on their podcast, and maybe 4, but it hasn't been that many. And I've got a cadre of gatekeepers who are really good at making people feel good, but I'm not going to be on your podcast, but thank you. And every once in a while, I'll say yes to somebody and end up, and there's like some teenager and I'm in their basement and like there's one person listening to their podcast. But what you did was you took a shot and you sent me an email, and you could have called, but you sent an email. You got the timing just spectacularly right. So you're exactly. I got a new book coming out. What do authors want to do? They want to promote their book.
100%.
And in this particular book, I'm so fired up over it. You probably tell by my tone of voice. I'm cranked up over this book. I think it's going to be just the book that everybody needs to read. I love the book. And you caught me on a morning where I was looking at my email at just the right time. And I get 1,000 emails a day. I saw it. I sent you a note. And then I did to you, my little test to you is, can you be flexible? Because if I want to be on somebody's podcast, if they can be flexible, then I can make it, because they can work it around my schedule. They go, no, here's my calendar link. It has to be at this time. I'm like, that's just not going to work for me, because I'm gonna commit to a time, and then someone wants to pay me for my time, and I'm ditching you for money.
Absolutely,
which is never a nice thing. So if you just think about what you did, all you did was interrupt me. Now, you said before we came on, and I know that you're pumping me up and you're saying nice things to me. But you're like, oh, I'm a fanboy. I love this book, like Fanatical Prospecting, and you showed me all the writing down there. But let's just say that that's true. And I'm on the other side. Like, I had approached John Gordon to ask John Gordon to do something for me, and I'm fanboy to John Gordon, so I'm nervous reaching out to John Gordon. We have the same publisher, and like my editor is his editor, so it's not like we're that far removed from each other. And my heart's beating just a little bit, reaching out to him to ask him for a favor. So I know that that's a little bit intimidating and nervous, and like, what if he says no and you're putting it out there? And, I could have sent you back a note and said, schmuck, I'm not going to be on your podcast. I'm too big for that. I'm a big old author. I could have done those things to you. But you didn't think about that. You just thought, I'm going to get the timing right. I want this guy on my podcast. This is what I'm going to do. And you interrupted me. And you got me. And I swear to you, when I say this number, at least 500 other podcasts did not. Because either they got the timing wrong, or they gave up on the first try, or they did that little thing. Here's my calendar link, sign up for a time that works for you. Whatever those things were, they did those. You sent me a personalized letter, a note that was not contrived, that was genuine, and it was value-based. Like, here are things I can do for you, which was really nice. It didn't have a stupid Calendly link in it, which is just the biggest turnoff for me personally. And I was like, I like this guy. Like, I just like the letter. And I said, you can be flexible. And you said, yep, no problem. I can take care of that. And then I was like, all right, we're going to make this happen. That's the art of interrupting. People, this has always been the case. People are not afraid of lead generation. They're not afraid of prospecting. They're afraid of interrupting, because they're afraid what might happen when they interrupt. And when you interrupt in a crisis, here's my promise. The objections are going to be harsher. People are going to push back. You're going to buy that lead on Zillow, and you're going to call 40 times, and the person's not going to return your call
right.
or return your email. That's going to happen. But if you don't interrupt, you don't eat. It's just that simple. I'm sorry I have to be the messenger to tell you that, but everything depends on your willingness to get over your uncomfortableness with interruption. And I love what you said. If someone's worth interrupting, do it.
Yeah, you mean I can't just buy the $99 Instagram funnel and just leads will rain from the sky and I'll never have to work again? Like, isn't that, don't you sell that program? Come on.
I know. Like, well, every other ad on Instagram is like, my funnel will blah, 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 blah. I love this. I made $1 billion doing this. By the way, you're going to get me on my soapbox. I'm a billionaire. I made $1 billion doing this. My question is, and this is just me, if I made $1 billion doing it, I sure as hell wouldn't share it with other people, and I wouldn't be on YouTube, because if I had $1 billion, I'm on my yacht someplace else. I am not talking to you schmucks.
Totally.
So, it's like, good Lord. So, and that, by the way, it's a really good segue, because one of the things that a lot of mediocre people are going to be doing during a crisis, as winter takes over, as the storm hits us, is you're going to be looking for easy buttons. You're going to be looking for, something that's simple, something that's easy, something that's bright, something that's shiny. Again, don't shoot the messenger. Here's the deal. There is no easy button. There is no magic pill. There is no bright and shiny. There is no fairy dust that you're going to sprinkle over your problem that's going to solve it. Right. The only thing that will help you outsell the crisis, that will help you increase your sales, that will help you stay motivated are the basics and fundamentals. The things that Scott teaches, the things that your coaches are teaching you, the things that you've learned through all the years. This is what works. It's the things that the highest earning real estate agents and mortgage professionals do every single day. That works. Here's the problem, Scott. It's boring. Basics and fundamentals are boring.
So boring.
But in a crisis, boring works. Mark my words.
It's funny. I was talking to some salespeople the other day in a different industry, and I'm like, hey, the beauty and the curse about our job is, if you make this many calls and this many contacts and you stay in a relationship with this many people, you will make, pick a number, 200 grand, 500 grand, $1 million. And the discouraging thing is every week you have to call this many people and you have to talk to this many people and you have to stay in a relationship with this many people. So it's the blessing and the curse of being a salesperson. Do me a favor. I know your time is short, but can we get 2 or 3 concepts from selling in a crisis to maybe whet the appetite of people that are looking to order the book and invest? There's going to be a time in the near future where plopping down $20 for a book might be a lot of money for people. So give us like 2 or 3 topics from there that you're excited for people to dive into in the book.
Yeah, it's number one, we just talked about it, is basics and fundamentals. And I spent a lot of time talking about those basics and fundamentals, and especially where you need to shift your time and attention during a crisis. So there's the book is 55 individual chapters. Now, people go, oh my God, 55 chapters. Most of the chapters you can read in 10 minutes. So they're really, I wrote this book intentionally to be a book that you wake up in the morning, you take 10 minutes out, you read a Selling in the Crisis devotional, and then you go out and you take over the world. So one of the key structural pieces that we talk about very early on is that right now you have to be better. And being better means that you have to get right with reality. And reality means that you have to execute the basics and fundamentals of your job better than you ever have before. So what you want to do first is go back and really look at what does it take to be excellent in your field. So if it's real estate, you have to do these things consistently. So if it's listing houses, I have to find people who are willing to sell. I have to get there before someone else gets there. I have to make a compelling reason for them to work with me and give them a proof case. I have to advertise their homes in the right places in the right way, and I need to take better pictures and set it up. And I look at real estate all the time because I invest in a lot of real estate, and I've just seen some egregious advertising of late where we just took a bunch of shortcuts. Well, you can't do that anymore. So that 3D tour you haven't been spending the money on, you got to get back. You got to do a better job of setting your homeowners up for success by, I know that they love the purple dining room. They're going to have to repaint it. And you're going to have to convince them, even though they're saying I don't have any money, that they need to do that. Those are basics. You're going to have to do good discovery. You're going to have to build good relationships. You're going to have to build relationships with buyer agents. You're going to have to build relationships with mortgage brokers. You're going to have to do all of those things. And then you're going to have to stage houses and do good open houses. And you're going to have to talk your buyers or your sellers off the ledge because they're going to be on the ledge a lot.
Right.
Those are the things that you have to do. And then when it comes to lead generation, all the things that we've been talking about. So, and I'm just throwing some random things out there, but whether you're in mortgage or whether you're in real estate, there is a set of principles, basics, and fundamentals that really haven't changed. They're the same as they've always been. And like you said, it's the blessing and the curse. We know exactly what to do. We get bored with doing it.
Right.
So you can't be bored with doing it. You're going to have to do that. So that would be one of them. Number 2 is you got to start thinking like a squirrel. And I know this is weird, but if you think about what squirrels are doing right now, we're heading into fall. I live in a pecan orchard. My squirrels are eating everything that they got. They are collecting all day long. They are not like hanging out on fences and resting in the sunshine. They're not chasing dogs around. They're not playing. They're not hanging out in the office doing email and admin work and like rearranging the storage closet. The squirrels are out right now collecting nuts and seed because winter is coming. and they are laser, singular focused on that. They are relentless. And if you go to YouTube, you can go see, like, just type in YouTube squirrel obstacle course and just watch them. Nobody ever stops a squirrel. They put up the craziest obstacles for squirrels, like, lines and little things that they have to turn around on, and cages and drops and all kinds of weird things. And every time the squirrel faces that, they run into it, they fall down, they run into it, they fall down, they try it a different way, but they go after it and go after it and go after it until they get to the bird seed, because 24/7, the only thing they think about is bird seed, because winter is coming. And the sales professionals that think like a squirrel, like they become the squirrel, I am relentless. I am unstoppable. I don't care what I run into. I don't care what obstacle is in my way. I am going to get the sale. I'm going to get the listing. I'm going to get the mortgage. I'm going to get the buyer. I'm going to do that just like a squirrel. If you do that consistently, you win. And the thing about squirrels that I love so much is that the squirrels don't just do it one way. Like, it's not just an email or not just a text message, or, you got lucky because I responded the first time, but you probably would have called me. My phone number is all over the internet. It's not that hard to call my office.
Oh, no, I texted you. I Facebook messaged you. I knew one of those things was going to get through.
I saw the Facebook message. I saw the messenger come through. I'm like, he's a little late on that, right? So that's what a squirrel does. Like, a squirrel says, well, if I can't go this way, I'm going to go that way. So they're going to use every channel, every way, every possibility to connect with people. And by the way, you're thinking long term. You're playing the long game. I'm connecting with Jeb early, but that's what a squirrel does. So you got to think like a squirrel. And I'll give you one more, because this is, squirrels and animals. Stay out of crab buckets. This is critical for you during this period of time. If you're in real estate right now, there's a lot to complain about. Like, yesterday you were driving a Ferrari. Today the bank came and picked it up because you can't make the payment on it. Because all of a sudden, your houses your contracts are falling apart. The houses aren't selling. You spend a lot of money, and I'm teasing about the Ferrari, but that's kind of how it was. Like, you're making bank, and then all of a sudden, and you can see it you're on Instagram too. Like, you see everybody parking with their. I've got my Ferrari here, right? So so all of a sudden everything was good. Now it's bad. And the problem is that you're going to be in an office, or you're going to be in a community with people who are starting to fail. And they're complaining about all the problems. They're making excuses for everything that is out there. And they are whining and complaining and excusing themselves right out of their career. And pretty soon they'll be getting a government job, or they'll be at Starbucks or wherever else. That's what they're doing. Now, the problem is that you have a lot to complain about too. And it feels good to complain. Like, we really need sometimes to let that go. But complaining is misery's mating call. And it just attracts more misery, and misery wants you on its team. And the problem is that once you start complaining and you start dealing with other complainers, they all start hanging around you. They will eat you alive. They will pull you apart. And if you think about crabbing, I don't know if you've ever done this, but I grew up on the coast, and so we would go out and we would do sport crabbing. We'd catch blue crabs and we put them in one of those white buckets that came from someplace. Probably had a bunch of chemicals in the bottom of it, but we would throw them all in there. If you've ever watched a bucket of crabs, and you've heard this analogy before, there's always a crab that's trying to crawl out, and that crab's probably smart, right? That crab's like, hey, we're all going to the boiler. So he tries to get out, and he's like, let's get out of here, guys. But as soon as he's trying to get out, they all pull him back in. That's what happens in your world when you hang around crabs, when you hang around the complainers and the excuse makers. So if you want to outsell the crisis, you got to start with mindset. You got to protect your mindset first. You can control your actions, your reactions, your mindset, but if you don't control your mindset, everything else falls apart. So protect your mindset. Surround yourself with coaches. Surround yourself with people who look at the crisis and say, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity because I can take market share. It's an opportunity because I can move faster than all these other people who are starting to slow down, pull over, rethink what they're going to do. It's an opportunity because with fewer people in the marketplace, there's less noise, and I can stand out. Hang around the people that say, this is a blessing, not a curse. This adversity, by the way, is going to make us better. It's going to force us to get back to the basics and fundamentals that made us great in the first place. It's a blessing because all of a sudden it gives us a moment to step back in our business and start thinking about what do we need to adjust in our business so that we're sleeker, we're more agile, we're more flexible coming out of this, where we're more cost effective, we're more efficient. If you hang around people like that, you're going to win because those individuals are going to build you up versus the crabs that are going to tear you down. So if you just think about those three core things, basics and fundamentals, boring works, go back to that. Think like a squirrel. Winter's coming. What are you doing relentlessly every single day to help yourself achieve your goals, no matter what obstacle is in your way? And 3, stay out of buckets of crabs. If you stay out of buckets of crabs and you hang out with rainmakers, you will be a rainmaker. And the rainmakers around you, when things are going bad, they're going to go bad. They're not going to let you wallow in it. They're going to pick you up and say, get over yourself. We got to go out there and work harder.
I love it, man. 3 rapid fire questions to close us up. Are you a cigar, whiskey, beer, iced tea guy? What do you do to unwind in the evening when you need to take a load off?
Whiskey. I used to be a cigar guy. Like, I've watched you smoking that cigar, and it makes me jealous. But I quit smoking cigars, mostly for my wife, who said that she didn't like cigars. But I'm either Scotch or whiskey. So in the wintertime, I'm Scotch. In the summertime, I am whiskey.
Perfect, man. Favorite movie and why?
Oh, God, that's a great question. Armageddon with Bruce Willis, because at the end, when like they get off the space shuttles, and the guy who's like been separated from his little boy, he shows up and he's got the space shuttle in his hand and he runs and he hugs his dad. Like that, I don't care how many times I watch that movie. My wife thinks that I'm just a complete moron about it, but I cry every time I see that, because it's like that's like the thing, like the son like running up and recognizing that his dad's the most important thing in his life.
I love that, man. By the way, every time the government does something wrong, I think of that scene in the movie where Bruce Willis is like, hey, you guys are NASA. Don't you just have smart people sitting around thinking shit up? Like, isn't that what you do? And every time the government does something stupid, I'm like, I figured that out. I barely made it out of high school. Like, don't you have smart people just sitting around thinking stuff up?
That's right. That's right.
And then last question, I'll let you go. Knowing that winter is coming, there's political uncertainty, there's geopolitical uncertainty, inflation is out of control. Like, what's in focus for you going into Q4 of 2022 and into 2023? What's in focus for Jeb, and like, what are you excited about? What's your rainmaker attitude right now that's working for you?
My rainmaker attitude is market share. When the pandemic happened, we did a quick pivot and we tripled or actually quadrupled the size of our company. So we grew ultra fast, and we did it because we were aware that was going to cripple companies and individuals in my marketplace. And I'm not much different than in the sales training space, where it's very fragmented and
right.
Anybody can like show up and go, I'm a sales trainer.
Mm-hmm.
So we recognized a lot of people would go out of business or they would fall back, and we took advantage of that and did things that other people in the world weren't doing. Same thing now. What I'm looking at is, how do I accelerate? Because, and I'll just leave you with this, in good times, when you're trying to take market share, it's sort of like you're running 65 miles an hour, you're running 70 miles an hour, and your competitor's running 65 miles an hour. And the competitor's like 10 miles ahead of you. Well, you can do the high school math on that, and it's going to take you forever to catch up with them, because It's just the incremental to catch up. Well, when a crisis happens, a lot of those competitors just pull over on the side of the road in the median and just wait it out. And I'm expecting that to happen. So if you're running 70 miles an hour and they're pulled over, you're gone. You're right past them. So what's getting me excited and fired up is that our organization is positioned well. We've run a little fat. We're going to lean up just a bit, and we've been doing that since March. And we've got a great group of talented people. And what we're going to do is we are going to take market share. We're going to take advantage of the situations when our competitors make mistakes, when they sit back, when they wait. And we're going to knock on more doors, and we're going to call more people, and we are going to do more marketing and more advertising. And we're going to stand out in a world where everyone else is putting their head down and they're just trying to hibernate and wait winter out. I'm excited about that. I love the challenge of this environment, and I like it because to some extent, when you talk about things not being boring, and all of a sudden it takes the boring world of everything just works. Like, I mean, one of the problems is, and Warren Buffett said this, when the tide goes out, you get to see who's been swimming naked.
Yep.
Well, it's been really, really, really easy to stay covered up in this. And I'm not even saying my own business. I think we've taken advantage of the fact that it was just easy.
Right.
So I love that it's going to be harder and more of a challenge. And I'm fired up for that.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for having us on, Jeb. I really appreciate you, man. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad I interrupted you at the right time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm truly, truly grateful.